to my YouTube live for this Friday, which is, of course, the 20th of March, which is I think it's the first day of spring today in North America. So I'm really excited to be here. If you have any questions, anything like that while you're on live, please put them in the chat. Okay, I'd love to see you put them in the chat, whether in the comments, whatever. I think that that's something that we could all do right now. I'd love to see you on here. The focus today is going to be on how to know if you're being productive. So, right now we live in some really uncertain times. I mean, there's lots of things that are going on right now that can affect productivity, can affect the reality, the normal elements of our lives they're disruptive. And I've always said that it's important to work backwards from your certainties. When it comes to time crafting, that's really critical. But if you're in a new environment and things are kind of topsy-turvy, how do you know if you're being productive? Like, how do you know? I mean, in some cases, you're used to going to an office, and now you're not. And in the office, there's this environment that says, hey, you know what, I'm being productive because I'm here. But when you're not there, how do you know? How do you know that you're doing the right things at the right time? How do you know that you're doing that even when you're not at the office? So there's a lot of nuance right now that I think is really, really valuable for people to kind of just take a breath, which we all need to take that 20 seconds that we are using to wash our hands and say, okay, let me take another 20 seconds and just go, how do I figure out if I'm doing the right things? Okay. So to that end, what I want to share with you are over the next half hour are some of the ways that you can recognize and validate your productivity along the way, because we're seeing a lot of things about, oh, remote work this, remote work that. Here's how you work home remotely. And there's no shortage of that. But ultimately, there's this emotional component to it. Like, how do I know? And how do I know I'm doing the right things for my family? How do I know that I'm helping my family do the right things? Lots of these nuanced things. So first off, I want to share with you, I'm going to get to the scoring system that I'm using and I've been using for a while myself, but I'm going to share something with you personally right now in terms of some of the elements that I think can help you in being productive in times where you feel you might not be. Okay. So number one is, I think that when we face uncertain times and our world has a lack of familiarity to it, it's very important, and James Clear alluded to this in his email newsletter this week, that you need to go with what's certain. You need to look to the things that you know to be true. Because when you can rely on those, and if you haven't figured out what's certain, now is the time to do it, that will help you feel like you are being productive. So, for example, awesome, I've got people watching on Facebook as well, which is great. So, to that end, one of the things that you should start to do, especially if you're feeling anxious and you're being bombarded with information about what's going on in the world that you have really no control over, I need you to keep these things in mind, okay? And just keep this thought in mind. And the idea is to command what you can control, cope with what you can't control. And when you do that, you will conquer the day, okay? Now, interestingly enough, coping, the term cope, now means to deal with or to handle. But its earlier origins come from the French word couper, which means to hit, punch. Like, that's the old French term for the 14th century. So coping used to be like to punch, to hit, to fight. And now it's softened a bit. I think that when you're dealing with the things that you need to cope with, right? What you need to do is you need to not just deal with it, but figure out ways to work around it, to fight it. So, to that end, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling nervous, you're not quite sure what to do. You've got this list, you're in a new environment. Work with what's certain. How do you feel? What's your energy level like? Well, I'm tired. Okay. Start to classify your to-do list by the energy level that you currently are having. And if you have a hard time doing that, then you may want to consider using time instead. How many things will take me 5 minutes? How many things will take me 10 minutes? Start to look at your tasks on your to-do list that way instead of by the date that you're going to do them. Again, I've always thought that the date is a secondary or tertiary lens that you should look through in terms of what you should be doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. The details of the task are not as important up front as the mode you need to be in to work on them. And right now, energy-based modes are really, really important. And I talk about this in my work a lot. So, again, and Travis is watching this behind the scenes. I'm also broadcasting this on Facebook Live. Thanks, Travis. I like that. Thanks for the kudos on that. Slow down and say, okay, what can I do right now with the energy that I have? And then do those things. Okay? What can I do now that my energy levels are up? Let me do those things. If you're having a hard time even thinking of things that are lower energy when you look at your to-do list, there's a strong chance that your task that you're looking at is too big. Now more than ever, it's important to break those things down to smaller components because that will help you feel like you're being more productive because you'll be able to check off more things. So, for example, if you need to go grocery shopping, things like make the grocery list, organize the pantry, things like that that are related to the grocery shopping project, because that's what grocery shopping is, especially now, for a lot of people. That's a big deal. So you could break that down. Look, I've done 4 things towards this project right now. Because remember, when you're working on a project, if you've got it in your head, and grocery shopping, we all know how to do it. You know, most of us do. But, you know, it's still a project. If you break it down to smaller components, you're going to see that dopamine hit of getting things done for it. So that's one of the ways. One of the ways, number one, is to use energy as a dictator or a director or a driver for what you will do. Time-based ones, things that you can hold on to, that you can grasp, that you can command, right? Because again, if you're looking at your house and you're like, how do I deal with all of this? Look with what's certain. Look to what is certain. Theming your days could be helpful at this point too. Doing horizontal theming. Got lots of the stuff that I cover in other videos, but also on my website. Time crafting now more than ever is I think going to be really valuable to people. And I to that end, I think that looking at your energy levels, what can I do right now? I mean, with what I have, again, this Roosevelt quote, which I shared before, I'm sharing it again. Do what you can, where you are, with what you have. Very prevalent right now. Okay, so that's one. Number 2 is breaking those tasks down, breaking those projects down. Hey, Dan, great. Thanks. Really appreciate it. I love multi-broadcasting. I'm going to get better at this too. The other thing is because everything else seems to be moving in slow motion except for one particular thing right now, which is coming fast and furious, take that opportunity to be more thoughtful about the things that you do. And one thing that you can do to do this is to figure out what are the things that you need to do and what are the things that you want to do every day or every week or whatever, right? So let's say the fundamental needs that you need to take care of. And I always look to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically Abraham Maslow came up with like the 5 tiers of the needs that we need. And physiological, food, water, the basics that we need. Then there's security and safety. Then there's connection. Those are like the 3, and those are often just basic needs, you know, and they level up. Then you get to the 4th level, and that's more self-esteem. Right now, that may not be as important, right, or as necessary. And then the 5th level is self-actualization, almost like enlightenment. But these tiers, we have to fill each of them to some degree, right? So when you're thinking about your to-do list, think about it in those terms. What are the things that you need to do that are going to fulfill those bottom 3 tiers, let's say? And then just categorize them. Hey, this is a need. Put an N next to it on your to-do list, right? Then start to really consider what are the things that you ought to do. We're hearing a lot of that too. Well, now that we're at home, or now that we have this, we have more time to do X, Y, Z, right? So I ought to organize my pantry. I ought to read that book. I ought to, all those things need to be considered. But the problem is that in times of chaos or in times of crisis, the things we ought to do, they paralyze us. There's no real sense of, it's hard to make decisions around it. So if you are looking at your to-do list and it's something on it that you think, I ought to do this, get clear about whether it's something you need to do or something that you want to do. If it's neither of those, get it off your list for that day or that week or whatever. But it doesn't belong there. If you can't get that decision quickly, it shouldn't be there because it's slowing you down, and it's not necessary. You're just in that consideration phase. You're debating it, right? And debate is going to slow these things down, and then you're going to get caught up. You're going to get diverted. It's a distraction at this point. Now, I will say that if it's something that you ought to do, and you decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to make a decision around it. I'm going to make it either a need or a want. Most things that you say, I ought to do this, are things that you want to do. Hi, Nick. Nick's behind the scenes. I love talking to both. And again, if you want to watch this live on YouTube, feel free. Most ought to do items that you say, hey, I ought to do this today, is a want to do. It's not really a need to do. Needs are more of that urgency, the things that are fundamental, that if you don't do them, things are going to fall through the cracks. If you're like, I ought to do this. If it gets to that point, then it's a need to do. Hi, Matt. Good to see you. So that's the ought to do stuff. So if you have things on your to-do list that are ought to do, just put an O next to it, right, in another column. And I'm going to show you what I use right now, in a little bit. Finally, there's the things that you want to do. Those are the things that are like the self-esteem, self-actualization, the highest level of that Maslow hierarchy of needs. So I want to make a video about the productivity ROI, which I'm going to reveal today. I want to work on my book. I want to play board games with my family. I want to, all of these things, okay? Those are important, but they should be taken care of after the needs in situations like this, because the needs are going to be things that you can do that if you don't do those, they'll fall through the cracks. You can have some harmony between them for sure, and they should stay on your list. Don't make no mistake. You shouldn't take them off your list, unlike the ought to do's, but they're valuable. So again, if it's something that you want to do, just classify it with a W next to you on the to-do list. And you can do this digitally too. Tags in different to-do list apps have needs and wants. You can just say need, want. Labels can do it as well. You could also do this in any paper planner, really. But here's the key. How do you track that? And this, by the way, works for kids right now too. Like, my kids are still in spring break, but after this, we're going to be doing this with the kids, because they're not going to have any structure, because school is going to be out of session for who knows how long at this point, right? So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to have them look at their list and what are the things you need to do, what are the things you want to do, what are the things you ought to do, and we're going to help them make decisions around that. Because this is I think this is something that they need to learn how to do, right? Because eventually they won't have school to give them that framework. So why not give them a framework that is simple, flexible, and durable now? And if, by the way, if you are running a large business or a small business where you're dealing with people who are working remotely now, this can also work for that too. Hey, Jim, I need you to do these 5 things today. And then Jim comes back to you and says, that's great. And I want to do these things also. Great. And then you can understand what needs and wants to be done. Simplifying at this point can create a real sense of how you know that you're being productive. So to that end, let me show you how I do this. And this is a bit of a reveal. I haven't really shown people too much of this so far, but if you've been following me on Instagram and stuff, I've got this little black duotang. And as of today, this is replacing, I'm going to get rid of the lighting here, this right here. There you go, I'll put this. This is replacing my daily progress planner. It's called the Daily Driver. And this is the daily planning sheet that I've been using for some time. Okay, I showcased it a little bit when I was down in the Productivity Con in January of 2020. I also showed it to some coaching clients and so on. And this is replacing my daily progress planner. Now you'll see here, there's certain elements that you don't need to worry about, right? There's like the date is important, obviously. And then if you've been following time crafting for a while, there's theming and all that stuff. And then there's this clock thing right here. And this is not something I want to really get into on this level because, again, it's not related to the how do you know you're being productive. There will be some elements around that I'm going to share with you over at productivityist.com, in the next little while. But this is where I'm looking at right now. This little, I hate when I do this, this little pill area right here. It looks like a little almost like a beaker. And it's, if you look, and it's hard to tell, it's called the ROI score, the productivity ROI. So in those columns, and I'll show you here real quick, is you can see that I put in there, and I'm going to put that there, but also here, you could see that I put like needs and wants in that column. Now, the bottom of that sheet has the little bottom of the beaker, I guess, the experimentation beaker right there. I'll show you on Facebook. Right there. That's where you would total it up. So, how does that work? Well, first off, if you want to go to productivityroi.com, and I'll put that link in the description and in the comments as well, it's forwarding to the productivity site where I actually go over this in more detail. There'll be a video that goes up. There'll be some instructions. But you don't need to do this. You can just simply mention what I told you already, which is the need to do's, the ought to do's, the want to do's, and just score them on your own. So a need, because it's basic, fundamental, things you need to do, 1 point. Each need that you complete is worth 1 point. Each need to do task is worth 1 point. Okay? If it's an ought to do and you haven't made a decision on it, guess what? It's worth 0 points because it's undecided, it's empty calories, it's things that really don't have any merit to you doing them today or whenever you're using this, whether it's a week or whatever. Want to do items, however, they're worth 2 points. Why? Because they're hitting that 4th and 5th level. They're the higher level of realization, right? And by the way, the productivity ROI, that ROI stands for Realized Objective Index. So your objectives being realized and what score you get based on that. So let's use this quickly as an example. So, and I'm going to be a little bit more cautious here, but you can see that I've got 10 lines here on this daily driver. And you can see that there are four needs, or 3 needs first. Then there are 3 wants, another need, another want, and another need. If I was to complete all of those, I would get, just to quickly tally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I would get 13 points out of task points, really. There are 10 lines there. So you take that 13 points you get, you divide it by the number of tasks that you've listed. That would give me a 1.3. My productivity ROI would be a 1.3. Anything above a 1.0 is a good metric for a productive day. 1.3 means that I didn't just do some things I needed to do, I did some things I wanted to do. So I'm hitting those higher levels, right? If I only did things I needed to do, if all 10 of those were needed to do items, then I would hit the median of 1.0. Hey, it's a productive day. I kept the wheels moving forward. I didn't go make any great gains, but I didn't lose any either, okay? If it's less than a 1.0, like a 0.8, anywhere between a 0.5 and a 0.1, wasn't as productive of a day as you could have made it, and there could be a number of reasons for it. Maybe you listed tasks that were too big. Maybe you had a lot of appointments that day and you overcommitted to what you could actually accomplish during that day, and so on and so forth. If it's a 0 to 0.5, maybe you were sick. Maybe you didn't get as much done because you weren't able to, because you weren't feeling very well. The highest score you could get on this naturally is a 2.0, meaning you did once all day long. And by the way, you don't have to divide it by the number of tasks you do either. You could divide it by the number of tasks, or listed rather. You could do by the number of tasks you do. So if you only did 8 tasks during the day, you could take the points for each. So 8 needs, that would be 8 divided by 8, that would give you 1.0. But if you want to get a real idea of where the gaps are in your productivity, let's say you did 8 tasks of the 10, you'd still divide it by the 10. So the highest you could possibly get just doing things you needed to do would be a 0.8. And I know I'm talking a lot of jargon here. I explain more over at productivityroi.com. But to me, this is a real quantitative and qualitative measuring tool, because you get to decide what you need and want to do. Or if you're running a business, you could make that distinction for your team, right? Or if you're a kid, and you're working from and you're homeschooling or you're doing things at home, this could be a framework that works for them too. Okay? Now, that is one way, and that's the way I'm working with clients and working with myself and going to be working with my family. And you're going to see videos of my daughter, my son. We're going to be doing this and showing them how they do it, because proof of concept, right? We should be showing that here as well. But it's going to show you like, hey, I had a productive day. I got a 1.0. Hey, I had a really productive day. I got a 1.5. And the great thing is that you can take those scores and you could apply them across every Monday. Hey, how did I do every Monday? Oh, Monday's been a really productive day for me. Wednesdays isn't as productive because I've done the last 4 Wednesdays and I totaled my score up, divided it by the amount of Wednesdays, and oh, why is that? Why am I not being as productive? So it gives you this simple, flexible, and durable way to score your productivity in a way that you're not really seeing with some of the other tools out there, whether it's either they're harder to manage or the algorithm isn't really visible. This is incredibly visible. So that is a way that you can be productive. Now there's and show that you're being productive. Now there's a final thing down here, and there at the bottom of the Daily Driver when you download it, there's 2 other things. One is called the Habit Tracker, and you can track your habits that way. So you could either shade in there or check off the circle if you've completed a habit, or if you want to divide the habit up into, you say you have 4 habits, you could divide the circle up into 4, or whatever you want to do it and shade it in depending on the habits you're doing. You could track your habits there. All right, but you don't get any extra ROI points for that. You don't get any extra task points. You don't get any extra points for that. However, the next column is the next circle is Journal Tracker. You do get an extra point if you do a journal entry. So if you do 1, 2, 3, doesn't matter how many journal entries. If you complete a journal entry, you get 1 point that you can add to your total before you divide it by the number of tasks you completed. So for example, if you have 10 tasks listed here, and you did 9 needs and you didn't do the last thing, well, you've got 0.9 so far. You get to add 1 more. You're going to get a 10. Now you're dividing 10 by 10, and you get a 1.0. So the bonus that you get for doing the journal entry is really valuable. And the reason I'm doing that is because I think journaling is a really powerful tool. That is the final way that you can know if you're being productive. Write in your journal. Write in your journal. Write in your journal. Keep a journal entry. I was reading a piece from F. Scott Fitzgerald during the Spanish plague, and he talks about an interface that he had, or a conversation, or something he had with Ernest Hemingway. And that was something he wrote about. He journaled. Journaling is the story of your days. When you journal, you can tell the story of your days. And by the way, if you're like, I don't know what to journal about, Mike, journal about whether or not you did it, how your energy levels were, and how you used that to measure the tasks you would do. Journal about how you're, struggling with anxiety. Journal about your ROI score. Hey, I got a 1.0. That's awesome. I did a lot of things I needed to do and some of the things I wanted to do. It tells the story. It's anecdotal. It's qualitative. You can see things. And it's going to be, when you look back, you're going to be able to go, wow, even during a time of crisis, a time of chaos, things that were uncertain, I was able to keep my head together, or this is what happened, or this is why this didn't happen. So there you go. So right now, those are the ways that you can know that you're being productive. You can tell. Number 1, start looking at your tasks through the lens of like the energy needed to do them, the time you need. Don't look at the dates as a primary driver. Look at them as the third layer underneath the I'm tired. What can I do when I'm tired? Oh, I can do these 5 things. Which one is due first? Look at it that way. Okay? That's number 1. Number 2, categorize your tasks using Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What are the fundamental things I need to do? Let me mark those with a need, an N. What are the things I ought to do? Let me mark those with an O. And then further to that, let me decide if they're even worth doing or if I need to turn them into a want to do item or a need to do, but more often going to be a want to do. Okay? Then, how do I score this? Let me get this productivity ROI that Mike's talking about and have a simple scoring system that I can share for myself, so it's validating to myself, my employers. If I'm working remotely, they've never really dealt with remote workers before, they can use it to say, hey, look, Tom, Jim, Jill, Judy, they've all been, they're productive because they're doing the things they need to do, and we have a score to prove it. My kids, I don't know how to keep them. Hey, here's the list. This is something they need to do, something they want to do, do it that way. So having a scoring system, a way to track that's simple, that's not going to overwhelm your time, something that you can just do quickly and easily, right? Finally, journaling. Keeping a journal is a great way to know what you've done, where you're at, how far you've come, what you're feeling like, the reasons things aren't getting done the way they need to be, all that stuff. So there are real four, and those are just 4 ways that you can do this. It doesn't matter whether you're working remotely from home, doesn't matter. This can be done any time, at any point. This is timeless advice. I've been using this framework for quite some time on my own. At present, this is the best time for me to put it out there. So I talked about prudent productivity in my last video, which is, I think, still very important, and this plays a role in that. So there you go. If you have, I mean, I've got some, I love the fact that we've got simple things. JDL Media, hey Dom, mentioned making coffee is a good starting point. Those little things, break them down. That way you can check off more things so that you know. And finally, I think the last thing that I think we need to talk about right now, just before we wrap up, is go easy on yourselves right now. Go easy on yourself. There's a lot going on, and we're not going to be able to do nearly as much as we would want to do of the things that we regularly do. Yes, there's going to be the opportunity to do things that we wouldn't normally have time to do, which I think is also somewhat of a fallacy. I think there's always going to be time to do those things that are important. But now we've got this pause, this slow-mo happening where we can do some of it. And we can feel that we can break past the bias that we couldn't have time to do it before. But ultimately, like, take time. Go for that walk. Take it easy. Connect with people. Schedule that time if you need to. Make that time. Maybe that's something that you need to do now as opposed to a want to do, because again, on that hierarchy of needs, connecting with people would be in that 3rd tier. So it's no longer a need, an ought to do. And you need to, it might be a need to do. You might classify that as a want to do because it's in that self-esteem range. So as I wrap up, I encourage you to check out Productivity ROI. It's something I've been working on for a while. My designer Noah put together. We've evolved the daily planning sheets to that. I do have a weekly and monthly versions of this that are available to Time Crafting Trust members, and I'll put a link to that in the description as well if you're interested in becoming a member of Time Crafting Trust. But I'm going to be doing more around this over the next several weeks and months. The idea of nuanced, prudent, like those kind of productive practices, how to score, how to know that you're doing right, self-validation, those kind of things. But the only way this works is if you're being honest with yourself. If you're being true, if you're doing the things you need to be doing, and you're being honest and forthright, because that's how you move forward anyways. So again, as I wrap up, think about this. Command what you can control. Cope with what you cannot control. And that's how you conquer the day. And don't forget, coping isn't just about dealing with it. It's finding the gaps, fighting against some of it where you can, looking at those loopholes. That's it. I want to thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. If you're watching this on Facebook Live, I'd love to hear from you then. Thanks to everybody that tuned in live on Facebook Live. Thanks so much for subscribing to the channel. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, now would be a great time. I'm going to be doing a lot more of this stuff. After all, I'm going to be spending a lot more time in here over the next several months. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch it. Take care of yourself.